Well, good morning. It is great to be here among you at San Saba, and I'm excited to be able to share with y'all some things that we have been doing together. In Acts chapter 14 and verse 27, when Paul and Barnabas had come to Antioch and they had gathered the church together, they rehearsed unto them all the things that God had done with them and how He had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. And so there in the assembly of the church, Paul and Barnabas gave a missionary report. And it was a report not of the things that Paul and Barnabas had done, not even of the things that the funds of the church at Antioch had done, but rather it was the things that God had done. And how God had opened a door of faith. And I am privileged to be able to do that for y'all here this morning, and I was wondering how that was going to turn out with the aspect ratio, but we'll get through it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, beginning in verse 9, Paul there is writing to the brethren, and it's interesting. In chapter 2, he reminded them of the things that Paul had done and how he had conducted himself when he was there among them, and used that to teach them how they ought to behave. And here in chapter 4, beginning in verse 9, it says, "But as touching brotherly love, y'all do not need that I write unto you, for y'all yourselves are taught by God to love one another. And indeed, y'all do it towards all the brethren that are in all Macedonia. But we beseech you, we are begging you that you increase yet more and more, and that y'all study to be quiet and to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we have commanded you, so that you may walk honestly toward those that are without, and that y'all may have lack of nothing." 4 points that Paul makes here. Number 1, he says that you need to love one another. He's talking about brotherly love, and that's something that was mentioned in the prayer earlier this morning, some of the songs that we sang. And how important that is. In John chapter 13, Jesus says, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another." Specifically says that if you love one another as I have loved you. I'm reminded this morning in Hebrews chapters 9 and 10 just how much Christ loved us and in what way He loved us, that we are to have that love. Secondly, he says that y'all need to study to be quiet. And the word here quite literally means don't be meddlesome. Don't be stirring the pot and causing strife and problems. And he says you need to work to do that. And it's interesting. People are funny. You know, if we're not careful, we can find ourselves getting into trouble. And he says we need to work at not being meddlesome, at being peaceful and quiet. And then third, he says to do your own business and work with your own hands. To work and provide for yourself and for those that are with you. And number 4, the part of the result of that is that you might walk honestly toward those that are without. Here's the idea of having a lifestyle that adorns the gospel of Christ. And the way that we live, the people around us will see. And that lifestyle begins with our brotherly love, and with us not being troublemakers, and with us minding our own business, working with our hands to provide for the things that we need as God has blessed us. And so I'm excited to be able to share with y'all this morning some of the things that we've been doing with the Manna Project, and just kind of a reminder of what the Manna Project is and what we do. We are committed, as Brother Justin reminded you this morning, to cultivating hope around the world. And that's kind of a snazzy tagline, but the idea is that we train people to be preachers, we train them to be evangelists, we train them to be disciples of Christ. We also teach them agriculture and trades. And our core concepts is helping the brethren to be self-sufficient and for those works to be able to sustain themselves ultimately without us. And so we're doing that by setting up preaching schools and resource centers and training centers and going places and doing leadership seminars and workshops on church growth and teaching agriculture and other vocations. Excuse me. And the results of that have been incredible. And over the years since we've been involved, and these numbers, again, they're accurate. They're high, but that's because of the power of the gospel. There have been, that we're aware of, about 3,000 baptisms, about 200 congregations planted, and 250 preachers sent out. And so the things that we do, we train preachers to be able to reach the local communities. And so we do this in Africa with preaching schools, and the word here that's used is bush schools. We don't go over there and set up a nice American facility with central heat and air and all of that, although that would be really nice for while we're there. It's interesting. As I was seeing back home, y'all were dealing with cold fronts. We were not. And when we got home, we were very thankful for the blessing of air conditioning. And so we do that, and also setting up training centers to provide short courses, maybe for brethren who aren't able or ready to commit themselves to full-time ministry, but they can come and take a short course and grow and learn and develop into being the leaders. It'll be elders and deacons and help the church to move forward. And of course, we're training farmers and tradesmen with practical methods of organic and intensive agriculture so that they can provide their food and their wages. We're teaching trades like sewing and welding, auto repair, water purification. And ultimately, we're training brethren to work in and for the kingdom, to help the church grow. And that's going to be done by reaching souls, both with the message of the gospel and with the love of Christ, as they reach out to their villages and their communities. And so the places that we are working currently. So we are in Kasese, Uganda, Talawanda, Tanzania, Wangarok, Kenya, just outside of Kisumu. We are also in Nepal, and there's a couple of places where we have a more limited presence in Central America as well. And of course, I realize whenever you see, Justin's coming, that means he's raising money. Well, yes, that's true. Question is, where does that money go? Well, one of the things that we really believe in, we want to be transparent and accountable about our stewardship and what we do. And so the funds that we bring in go to support creating the infrastructure for these schools, paying for the school staff, and also some of the logistics, health care. We're there in the yellow fever belt. Malaria is a big problem. Yellow fever is a problem. Typhoid, things like this. And so we do provide health care for our staff and our students while they're there. And there's some emergency issues that occasionally do come up. And, plane tickets so that we can get there and back. And then, of course, educational resources and material. You can't run a school without books. But what we're not doing is using those funds to support students and giving them support. And that's one of the things that's kind of interesting. That has long been our model in mission work, I think, through the whole in the brotherhood, where we'll go and we'll bring men and we'll support them very well for 2 years in preaching school, and then when they graduate, that support's gone. And they end up not preaching. Because they're going and surviving. And so we're getting away from that model in what we do. And so going back to our passage here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, these 4 things: to love one another, to be quiet and peaceful, to work with your own hands, and to have that open and honest lifestyle among those that are without. And those are the things, as Paul showed the brethren there at Thessalonica, this is how we conducted ourselves. You see that reminder in chapter 2. So also at the Manna Project, that's what we do. And so my family is fully self-supported by the work that I do. And so the funds that we receive don't go to our dinner table, they go to the mission field. They go to the work that's being done. And it's interesting, when we go there to Africa and we're teaching these guys, you can be self-supporting. They're like, well, that's easy for you to say. You're a supported missionary. No, I'm not. I'm not. I support myself. You can do it too. And so some of the places that we've been, Uganda, the work there in Kisesi is in a tenuous situation at the moment. I have a great school going on there. We've got currently 15 students that are in their second year of training. And we're right up against the border with Congo. Matter of fact, there I am standing in Congo as Greg is crossing the river. But that's as far as I've gotten into Congo. I didn't actually get a passport stamp. That's an unofficial border crossing there. But the trouble is that there in Congo, there are some very valuable resources, lithium and cobalt, that we need for our electric cars and cell phones and things like that. And somebody from the Western world is taking all of these resources without paying for them. And they can't do that if there's peace. And so they're stirring up trouble among the locals and arming them. And as long as they're busy fighting each other, then they can come and take all the minerals and leave with no problem. The trouble for us is, as a crow flies, that's about 15 miles from where our school is. And so there has been some issues of spillover violence. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we are teaching these people to study, to be quiet, to not be meddlesome, not be stirring up trouble, but to have love one for another. And so we're praying for peace there. We're praying for that situation to be resolved. And so it has been now over a year since we've been there in Uganda, but the work there at the school continues under the capable leadership of Tom, who's our director, and of Happy Hankson, who's our farm manager, doing great work. And with the work there at the farm, he's really doing a lot to whittle down that school budget and working on getting that school to be self-supporting. I was just this morning messaging with one of our good friends that we've worked closely with over the years there in Uganda, asking him how the situation is. And it's like, well, it's not great. But it's somehow improving. And so we're continuing to pray for that. And we're really excited about the newest place that we're working in Kenya, just outside of Kisumu in the village of Wangarat. And I was this morning talking to somebody explaining that Paul, who's the director of our school there at Wangarat, was telling me some of the translations, loose translations of some of the village names. So Wangarat means a gateway, and that was in old times an official border crossing for the Luo people who lived around Lake Victoria. And so if you were going to cross into the nation of Luo, you went through Wangarat. But there's another village that the name of it loosely translates to the mosquitoes make you hit yourself. Not a great place to go. But there's souls there. And our work there in Kenya is really because of Paul. And he's been preaching the gospel there. His father was converted to Christ many, many years ago. He was a great man, Charles. He's not doing well in his health. Actually, he lost his wife. She had an accident, had a seizure, fell into her cooking fire, and passed away about 2 months ago. So Charles is not doing great, but his faith is strong. He's looking forward to seeing his wife again someday. But Paul was messaging me saying, hey, you need to come to Kenya, you need to come, and we need to work with you. We get so many requests, and usually those requests are followed up with, well, we want money. And Paul kept sending requests, so I said, finally, look, I've got this 15-page doctrinal questionnaire. Before I even talk to you about working with you, you need to fill this out. I need to know who you are. So I sent that to him. I thought he'll go away. He sent it back. Great, now I've got to read this thing. And so I read it, and he's very sound in the faith. And I'm like, okay, that's great, Paul. I'll let you know when we have plans to go to Kenya, which we don't right now, but I'll let you know. And then time went by, and he called me. He said, I'm in Plano. Can we have lunch? Okay. So we went and had barbecue together, had lunch, and my first question for Paul, I said, look, you're in Kisumu, Kenya. Bear Valley has a preaching school in Kisumu. Why do we need another preaching school? And he cited this problem of students being supported, that most of those graduates are not preaching. He said, we need something different. We need to train men to be self-supporting and to be able to go out on their own. And that's why we need the Manna Project here. I said, okay. I like that answer. And so we went there to Wangaratt, and there's the church building that also serves as the building for the school there at Wangaratt. Paul's younger brother Moses, also a great guy, self-starter, and there he is in his tree nursery, and he is raising trees from seeds, and he's planting these around church buildings, using those to beautify the church grounds and also provide food that they can use to help the poor in their villages. He's also selling those trees to some of the fancy resorts and hotels and things like that where all the tourists come to. And so he's supporting himself in that way, doing great work. And one of the things there at Wangaratt at the church building, they have a good, strong, spring-fed well. And that water flows freely. And so they have here set up there, inside of that building is a grain mill. And anybody from the village can come and they'll open that up and mill their grain for them, make flour for free. But also just right over here is a public water tap. And you can come and get that good, clean water absolutely free. However, you can't just walk up and get water. No. The valve is on the inside of the wall. If you want water, you've got to talk to a member of the church, because it's not about giving away water. It's about giving them the water of life. And so while they're there filling up their jugs and the Christians are there watching so they can turn the water off, guess what we're talking about? We're talking about Jesus Christ. We're talking about the gospel. And so there at Wangaratt, Kenya, we have currently now 6 students in the school. We're starting small and doing that because we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves. We want to be sure that we do what we do well. And I'm really excited about the program there. It's a 1-year program. And our total operating budget for the Manna Project there at Wangaratt is 0. No American money there. And so we are there in a supporting role. We're providing resources, curriculum. We're providing our time to be there and to help them grow and to help them go. And ultimately, the goal is for them to not need us anymore. And while we were there this last month, one of the first things we did was we went out door knocking. And it's amazing. You know, when we were there, we knocked, in 3 hours, we knocked a total of 10 doors. And received 11 contacts. There was somebody who had company, and that was also a contact. Very receptive, people who want to know the truth there. And it's encouraging to see the brethren getting out and doing that work, doing that evangelism. But again, it's about teaching them to love one another, teaching them to be quiet and peaceful, to work with their own hands, and to live that honest life towards those that are around. Then you move a little bit further south to Talawanda, Tanzania. We're there on the coastal plains outside of Dar es Salaam. And really exciting, while we were there, we were putting on a leadership seminar, and Lee was also doing a ladies' seminar. Of course, we were teaching courses for the preaching students. But we had all of our graduates and alumni, save one, come there to be with us. And we were speaking to all of these men, asking them, how are you doing? What work are you going in? And all of them except these 2 are preaching. And those 2 ladies, of course, are not preaching. But what they are doing is they are working with orphans, and they're working with children, and working with women in their village, and doing great work for the Lord with the knowledge and the skills that they've gained. But we have men, like Alex Tunda over here, who has gone back to the village where he came from, raised by denominational preachers, planted a congregation of the Lord's church that continues to grow. And we have Lazaro back up there in the corner. He's Messiah. When he came to us, he couldn't read. And now he is a preacher of the gospel. And he's gone into a Maasai village that nobody who wasn't Maasai could reach, but he reached that village. And actually, just within the last few weeks, the elders of that village donated land to build a church building there. We're planning a congregation there in that village, and Lazaro is the preacher there. Epifanos Ngoya in the blue shirt there. He was a Pentecostal preacher when he came to us. He is now preaching. The congregation he was preaching for, he preached the truth to them. There's about 200 Christians there who, when he came to school, were lost in denominationalism. Venante. Venante is working in the southern end of Kenya. The town where he's working in is the headquarters for the Catholic Church in the nation of Tanzania. And he's there working, planning a congregation. It's a hard work, but it's a good work. And one of the things that's really exciting, while we were there, all the alumni were there together meeting and planning a gospel campaign where they were all going to go to this town I can't pronounce the name of, where Venante is, at their own expense, and hold a door-knocking campaign and help to get that church growing. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we're about. And there's several others, all great work going on. And it makes a difference in places like the village of Mpwapwa. It's fun to listen to Greg try to say that name, Mpwapwa. The church there at Mpwapwa began several years ago when one of the locals was converted to Christ and he began evangelizing. And he planted a congregation. It was thriving. He became ill and passed away about 3 years ago. Since that time, that congregation stopped meeting. They just went back into the village. And there was somebody who was a good friend of that preacher who's now gone on to his reward, and he contacted us, and he'd been talking to different preaching schools. Can you please send somebody here to this village to revive this church? This village needs the truth. And it's kind of out there. It took us 2 days to get there, and nobody would go, because what would they do when they got there? And so we were able to go to this village, and for the first time in about 3 years, that congregation came back together. Those souls repented of their apostasy and came back and have begun serving the Lord. And there is now a preacher. They're living at Mpwapwa, and he is running a sewing shop and using that to support himself so that congregation can continue to thrive and to reach souls with the gospel. And so there we are there at the School of Tanzania with our current student class. We have 8 students now who are studying there at Talawanda. Really excited to see what these young people are going to do when they graduate and go out. And one of the challenges that we have out there is good, reliable, clean drinking water. And we were blessed a couple years ago with the ability to drill a water well. And so we followed all the procedures, contacted the government. They sent a government representative out with the geologic survey, and they put a stake in the ground and said, drill right here. This is where you'll get your water. And so the truck came, and they used every bit of drill stem that they had and had a dry hole. The survey was wrong. So, plan B, we put up a system to collect rainwater and use that rainwater to supply all the needs of the school. And that system has been great. It's been there for about a year. But we needed more. And so in the last couple of months, we were able to raise the funds and double the capacity of that system, really just in time. We got those tanks put together and operational just before the rains began. We're now in the rainy season, so those tanks are filling up so that, Lord willing, we'll have enough water to carry us all the way through the dry season. And again, it's about teaching them to love one another and to be quiet and work with their own hands. And, you know, I mentioned in Bible class, church problems happen. Strife and conflict happens. It happens here. It happens in the mission field as well. And boy, I got to tell you, when those Maasai ladies get to fighting, you could put it on pay-per-view with Mike Tyson. But it's amazing to see when that problem comes up and we talk about, okay, this is what the Bible says. Don't worry about what this other person is doing. What are you doing? Are you living out these principles of the gospel? And to see those hearts softened and changed, and to see peace prevail. And by the way, the people in the village notice. When somebody goes to the doctor with their ear bit off, people in town talk, right? But when they see those two ladies coming together in love and friendship and peace, that makes an impact on the people around us. And so yes, we do face challenges. We do face strife and conflict in the mission field just as we do here. But just as it works there in the mission field, the principles of the gospel can work to bring peace and unity, and the Word of God can go out powerfully here too. And one of the things that we were able to do while we were there, somebody was asking me earlier about African food. How is African food? It's horrible. They don't season nothing. I mean, it's rice and beans, and rice and beans, and rice and beans, and no seasoning. When we pack to go over there, we load up a bag of bottles of hot sauce, and we think this is ridiculous. But by the time we're ready to come home, we're out of hot sauce. And so one of the things that Leah was able to do last month was she taught a class on how to make a habanero mango salsa. Really good using local crops. Habaneros, by the way, are a major cash crop there. I don't know how or why. Somebody buys them. I never see any Africans eating them, but they're there. And it was really interesting to see. Yes, the ladies, who were the cooks, they were there, learning and taking notes. But there's one of our men, one of our preaching students, taking notes. He got excited about the idea of food that could taste good. He was like, I've got to take these notes back to my wife. And along with that, teaching principles of food safety and things like that, and making connections. And yes, Leah and the boys, they don't go with me on every trip, but they do travel with me some. And at first, I wondered about the value of that. But it's amazing. On Sunday, when we were there at Talawanda, me and Greg, one of us preached, one of us taught the Bible class, and Leah taught the ladies during Bible class. When worship was over, there was a nonstop line of women waiting to talk to Leah. There was no line of people wanting to talk to Justin and Greg. But Leah had a line. She made a connection with those women in a way that us ugly men can't. And that line turned into the salvation of 3 souls. 3 of those Maasai women were baptized into Christ that day. And by the way, they're from that village there where Lazaro is beginning to work. And there are those 3 ladies with Leah and it's not about her. It's not about me. It's about the message of the gospel. It makes an impact. But it takes different people sometimes to make that impact. And it's about reaching these souls and changing their lives. And one of the things that we noticed, particularly among the women, is it's interesting. Going back to this picture, these young kids. Sometimes I get asked about, well, how's the education system there? Is it, are they able to go on? Well, something that we've learned in the last year is when they finish the 8th grade, they sit for an exam. And if you don't pass that exam, you are done. There is no option for more school. You're done. So if your daughter is a 14-year-old girl who had a bad day on that test, who, missed 25% of school because, hygiene resources there aren't what they are here. She fails that test. What do you do with that girl? How do you keep her where she needs to be? And we saw a great need. And so my wife and I began making plans, and this really was my wife's idea, and I quickly saw the value of it, and we talked to some of the brethren there, and they said, yes, we need this. And so last year we began construction on Talawanda's Hope for Women. It's a facility where we broke ground last year, and excuse me, there it is now. We're about halfway done with construction, place where we're taking women who are at risk, who are in a difficult place and not able to support themselves ethically, and giving them a place where they can come for about a year. We're going to teach them first and foremost the gospel. We're going to teach them homemaking skills, food safety skills, and trades, things they can use to support themselves and be okay, and then help them transition back out into the villages. And construction is taking a lot longer than we had hoped that it would, but it is moving along. And we're very excited about the opportunities there to reach those ladies. And again, I mentioned food safety. Typhoid is one of those diseases. It's very common. Typhoid comes from unsafe food handling practices. And so that's one of the things that we've started doing, is teaching a food safety seminar. And it was interesting. This last time we were there, we noticed, but lunch took forever to get ready. I mean, they start the fire, they're making the beans, they're making the rice. It takes a while, and then they bring the lunch out. But then supper, we realized there's not a fire in the kitchen, and the food comes out fast, and it's not hot. And we began asking, well, we just cook double at lunch, and then we serve it again at supper. Like, no. Refrigeration is not a thing. Food warming lamps is not a thing. And so we took some of those leftovers, and we had brought one of those little toy microscopes from Walmart and put that under a slide and said, look at all the things on this rice that are moving around. That's where you get typhoid. Oh. And those little things make a difference in lives. And again, it's challenging. The last time that I was there, we were there during the rainy season. This time we were there just before the rainy season. And those little cars, they work them like four-wheel drive trucks. And there's definitely moments where we wonder if we're going to get where we're going. But ultimately, it's about the foundation on which we stand. And this is right by the entrance of the school there at Wangarat, Kenya. This big rock that presumably they couldn't move. Christ, our solid rock, Psalm 18:2. And if we keep that as our focus and as our foundation, it'll work out. So those are the things going on there. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1, Paul says, moreover, brethren, I do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed upon the churches at Macedonia. And so when Paul talks about the grace of God that these impoverished brethren have received, he uses that to spur on the Corinthian brethren, these wealthy brethren, to love and to good works. And so you've seen the grace of God bestowed on the churches in Africa. Let's talk about here at home. Let's talk about how we can apply these things to love one another, to study to be quiet, to work with our own hands, and to walk honestly toward those that are without. At the end of October, I held a gospel meeting at 4th and Stewart and Brownwood, and I was asked to emphasize evangelism, focus on evangelism training. I said, okay, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And so me and one brother went out door knocking for an hour one day. And then the second day, there were 4 who went out door knocking with me. And both times we went out for about an hour. And we ended up with 5 good contacts. We killed a yellow jacket nest. We lit the pilot light on a water heater. Simple stuff. And it's interesting, when you go door knocking, and I realize, the things that people say here about door knocking, but it's kind of funny, when you knock on the door and somebody opens the door and says, what do you want? So, that's a funny thing, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you. We're just, we're Christians here in the neighborhood, and we're just checking on our neighbors to see how can we help you? Can we pray for you? Is there something going on that you need help with? boy, that conversation changes very fast. And you find open doors and open hearts. Now, we knocked on a lot more than 5 doors in those 2 hours. I mean, it's not the same response rate you get in Africa, to be sure, but the souls are there. Souls are there that are looking, that are searching. And so whether it's here at home or whether it's halfway around the world, if we do these things, God will be glorified and the kingdom will grow. So where are we going? Well, so this coming year we have plans to continue working on these places in Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya in particular, also Nepal, and we're still exploring those opportunities in Central America. And as there's other opportunities and souls that come up, we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. So some of our struggles, I think we're all feeling the bite of inflation. Airfare now is more than double what it was a couple years ago. And everything has gone up. And that's been really a challenge, which, by the way, I really want to commend the directors of our preaching schools, because as the costs of things have nearly tripled on a lot of those things in Africa, because the inflation that we're feeling here, they're feeling it a lot worse. Yet still, through the work that they're doing, those budgets have gone down. I mean, they're not zero, but they've gone down as inflation has gone up. So there's ongoing need to be able to keep these things going and keep this work going. And so first and foremost, we need your encouragement. We need your prayers. We say that we're a praying people. Let's be a praying people. Let's act like we believe the promise that the fervent, effectual prayer of a righteous man avails much. And, Justin mentioned the prayer list in the bulletin this morning. There's a lot of people there who have come and asked for our prayers. Make it a point. Put it on your calendar. Put an alarm on your phone. Pray for these things. Pray for these people. Pray for the works that y'all are involved in. Both, the Manna Project and Brother Goodham, that good work over there in India. And, and so, yes, we do need funds to be able to keep doing those things. And so we are looking for 10 congregations or individuals to give us a one-time shot of $5,000, and that'll fully fund all of the plans that we have for this year. But in all things, we need to keep the main thing the main thing. We need to practice brotherly love, to love one another. And it's interesting, Paul says that y'all do it towards all the brethren that are in all Macedonia. And he says, I want you to increase more and more. So I see this congregation. I see your love. It's amazing. I mean, what a great sacrifice of Michelle to give up all that bread that was in her purse. Thank you for that. But in all seriousness, I see the fruits of your love. We need to increase more and more, and do that not just in all San Saba or in all Texas, but all the way around the world. You can make a difference. And that love goes forward as we work to be quiet, not stirring the pot, not meddlesome, but we're doing our own business, working with our hands, so that we can have an honest lifestyle towards those that are without, and that we will have lack of nothing. It's God that provides the increase. And so, as we think about the grace of God bestowed on the churches in Africa, how are you doing on these things? Are you putting these 4 things into practice? Maybe you need to increase. Maybe you need prayers for forgiveness for something you've done or haven't done. Maybe you're not a Christian yet. You need to put on Christ in baptism. Maybe there's something else going on and you covet the prayers of the brethren. Let's pray together about those things. But whatever the need is, don't leave here with it. Let's pray about those things together, and together let's glorify the Father. If you have a need, won't you let it be known? Together we stand and while we sing.